We have seen so many examples of the raw terror of the earthquake and its aftermath, the terrible human cost, the lives lost, and the fearsome scale of the destruction. But John Irvine's dispatch tonight captures something of the humdrum horror of life after so much death, of those forced to wait and wait for the bodies of their loved ones to bury.
How long have you been waiting here?
A week.
You've been here a week? Okay.
Yeah.
What's it been like?
Horrible.
Of the dwindling hopes for a new miracle, and of the rescue teams left to comfort those who have little choice now but to accept the reality before them.
Smaller buildings like this one in Antakya's old city have been ignored. In areas like this, they truly have no idea just how many people are dead and buried.
Also on News at 10 tonight. Back here, we have not, in modern times, had it so bad. Confirmation of the worst fall in living standards since relevant records began. Not aliens and not spy balloons either. Further confusion over exactly what those last three objects really were.
Well, people are interested and curious as to what we know, and the reality is we don't know a lot about what these items are yet.
The BBC's offices in India are raided after its highly regarded expose of Prime Minister Modi. And a new Valentine's Day work of art from Banksy until the council had other ideas.
This is On TV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. After so much destruction, so much noise, for those waiting beside the remnants of their homes in Turkey and Syria's earthquake zone, it is now the silence that is deafening. 8 days on, the sounds of life under the collapsed buildings are all but extinguished. 40,000 lives have been lost, and they will very sadly not be the last. Families are still waiting, but no longer hoping in that silence and cold and often in darkness. They await the bodies of those they hold dear to be dug out from where they were buried by the earthquake so they can be given a fitting final farewell as religious tradition dictates. In Antakya in Turkey, the New Testament city of Antioch, there are few gospels of good news now.
In Antakya, they are scared of the dark. All that pierces the pitch black are fires to fend off the cold, and the searchlights, the flashing lights and the headlights that tell you the emergency teams are working round the clock. The end of the world here happened just after 4 a.m. In this quake zone, the dead of night has literal meaning. At the site of every collapsed building where the dedicated dig, you see the relatives. They patiently do their duty, waiting to receive the bodies of their nearest and dearest. Those who could so easily be buried under the rubble but are not, have loved ones who are. The couple on the right here are waiting to claim the body of his mother.
She's my mom. Not mother-in-law. She's my mom.
How long have you been waiting here?
A week.
You've been here a week? Okay.
Yeah.
What's it been like?
Horrible. Worst experience of my life. I will never forget that. Never. I'm a doctor. I've seen bad things. I've seen terrible things, but this is the worst.
And how long will you stay here?
When I get my mom, we will bury her and we'll leave.
Antakya's history stretches back 2,500 years. When St. Peter and St. Paul lived here, they knew it as Antioch, but few live in the old city today. Most of the homes that line its narrow streets have been rendered uninhabitable. Understandably, most of the rescue effort has been concentrated on the largest buildings. More residents mean more chance of finding survivors. But the consequence is that smaller buildings like this one in Antakya's old city have been ignored. In areas like this, they truly have no idea just how many people are dead and buried. Early in the day, this Mexican rescue team thought they detected a pulse. Looking on, Beich knows his mother, father and sister are in the rubble. After calling for silence, the team asked for an Arabic speaker. He's told to call out for anyone who can hear to tap once. But there was no response, and inevitably, hope faded. The leader of the Mexican team tried to console Beich. "I can feel your pain," he said. Throughout the wreckage that was Antakya, pain is plentiful. Among the cherished buildings destroyed, the Habibi Neckar Mosque dates from the 1st century AD. It was rebuilt after the last big earthquake here almost 200 years ago. Can Antakya rise again after this one? Sadly, the scale of the damage must raise serious doubts. The place known in the Bible as Antioch may now be nothing more than ancient history. John Irvine, News at 10, Antakya.
It is so incredibly sad watching those people and watching the hope fade. And for the areas of northern Syria run by rebels opposed to President Assad, his decision to open 2 more border crossings to allow in more aid from Turkey is simply a case of too little and way too late. The rebel-held north has been starved of rescue teams for the past week, costing lives, and yet more will be lost to cold and hunger unless supplies reach them quickly. Much of the area affected in northern Syria is not controlled by the Syrian government, and before today only 1 border crossing was allowing aid through at Bab el-Hawa. But the UN has helped to arrange the opening of 2 more at Bab el-Salam and Al-Ray.
Outside an intensive care unit in a hospital in a corner of the earth the world has all but abandoned, a young mother tries to process the trauma of the last week. Dima gave birth to her son Adnan in hospital half an hour after she was injured in the earthquake. With nowhere else to go, she took him back to the ruined building where they lived, only to be caught again in another collapse. A wall fell on top of me as I slept, she explains. My husband got us out. There was no one there to help. Baby Adnan arrived back in hospital, pale and dehydrated. Despite his difficult start in life, he does at least still have his parents. Ayham is one of Syria's newest orphans. His mum and dad and his sister all died in the early hours of last Monday. He remembers his father carrying him downstairs. Then a big rock fell on us, he says. So many years of a brutal war have left this part of Syria near helpless in the aftermath of this latest disaster. It's still held by rebels who've been fighting forces loyal to President Bashar al-Assad, and conflict has closed off most of the routes by which aid might get through. The UN has prized a couple open, but medical supplies and shelter remain in short supply.
I have an urgent message to the international community. The human suffering from this epic natural disaster should not be made even worse by man-made obstacles. Access, funding, supplies. Aid must get through from all sides, to all sides, through all routes, without any restrictions.
So many Syrian childhoods have been blighted by trauma. In the northwest of the country, the young have learnt another horrible lesson. Catastrophe comes in different ways. Geraint Vincent, News at 10.
Well, back here now, and however much pay has been going up, and it has for millions of people, as today's figures show, inflation has been going up more, much more. So much so that in terms of a fall in standards of living, we've never had it so bad, at least not since relevant records began. Taking inflation into account, pay actually fell by more than 3.5% in the last 3 months of last year. And another sign of how hard up so many are, more people, young and old, are returning to the workforce.
Pay growth is picking up pace. Here in Liverpool, there's proof. This restaurant has just hiked hourly pay by 10%. The owner feels he has little choice in an economy where there are almost as many vacancies as there are people looking for work.
I've been in the industry 41 years and I've never ever seen a time like this when it comes to recruiting, and I just hope that by increasing the salaries and increasing the benefits and the working conditions that we can attract that talent back in.
The problem, of course, is the experience of most people in work currently is they are poorer. University staff were on strike today, calling for higher pay. Average pay, when adjusted for inflation, fell by 2.5% in December, the 14th consecutive monthly fall. We've been here before, of course. Prices rose faster than pay for several years after the recession in 2008 and for several months after we voted to leave the European Union. But the current squeeze is sharper, and of course, it isn't over yet. It's little wonder that industrial action has become more frequent. The number of days lost to strikes almost doubled between November and December and will rise well above 843,000 in the months ahead. Pay growth across the economy accelerated by 6.7% at the end of last year, more than expected, and it's not keeping pace with inflation. Workers in the public sector at the sharp end of all this. Pay rises in the private sector are much higher, although the gap has narrowed, and the government insists higher pay for nurses and teachers will mean higher prices in the shops.
What we've got to avoid, and this is not just the government saying this, it's the Bank of England as well, is getting inflation embedded and fuelled by increased wage demands and giving in to those demands. So I'm afraid the government's going to have to stand firm on that.
There are signs that more people are deciding to rejoin the workforce. The government hopes it's the start of a trend. During the pandemic, Maria Holt decided to retire early to look after her grandson. Money is tighter. She can't claim her state pension for 4 years, but lockdown proved to be a revelation.
It did make me realise that I could spend less money because we didn't go out the house for a year. I realised that you can cut back and budget, and me and my husband, we manage.
Maria has decided there's more to life than work, but there was a record flow of people moving from economic inactivity to employment at the end of last year. Whether it happened by choice or necessity isn't clear.
And Joel and Romilly are here to talk, I want to say through the good news, but I'm not sure there is any. Joel, what I really wanted from you was a sense, which I think a lot of people at home, we've had bad news after bad news. People kind of want to know, how far through this do you think we are? Is there any good news on the horizon?
There is some good news here, Tom. I mean, look, as the Chancellor pointed out this morning, unemployment is near record lows. The issue is a lot of people who are in work are demonstrably feeling poorer, and it's little surprise. They've been hit, first of all, by a wave of very high inflation, and secondly, and increasingly, we're going to see, and it's not picked up in these figures, but during the course of this year, rising interest rates. They're going to be feeling the impact of this. The news, the outlook is less grim, but sometime, if all these trends continue, sometimes towards the end of this year, it's likely pay in real terms will start rising again. But it's going to be the autumn and beyond, I suspect, before that happens. The other bit of good news today was this issue about the workforce. The UK is in a uniquely challenging and desperately unenviable position in the sense that we have fewer people in work or looking for work than we did before COVID, and quite a lot fewer as well. About 300,000 fewer people are in the workforce. So news that people are coming back into work is extremely encouraging because it reduces upward pressure on pay and the pressure on the Bank of England, of course, to raise interest rates. Interest rates have gone from 0.1% to 4% in a little over a year. Investors are betting that another rise is more likely than not next month.
OK. Romilly, can I put the question of council tax to you, because that's been a discussion point today. What the last thing people really want to know is their council tax bills are going up, but it looks inevitable that they will.
Yeah, not much good news, I'm afraid, in council tax terms. 3/4 of councils in England saying that from April they will be pushing bills up by the maximum 5%. So to put it another way, that would add £100 on the bill of an average Band D home. And in Wales and Scotland, where there is no cap, bills could be higher yet. Councils are saying this is to deal with a huge shortfall in their budgets caused by, you guessed it, inflation, but also because of increased demand for services like social care. And I was in Kent today, which isn't a badly performing council, but they were saying they are going to have to make cuts despite these increases across the board. So what people are going to find is that they will be opening higher bills, but they'll also be finding that the services they rely on are being cut. And it was really striking. I was talking to young families in Kent today, and they were saying to me that when money is tight, you really rely on the things that are free, like the libraries, the play centres and the youth centres. And if those go too, then life becomes really difficult.
OK, one day we will have better news, but not just yet. Thank you both very much. OK, well, let's move on to tonight's update from the United States and what we do and what we don't know about those balloon-like objects that it has been shooting down. There are, as a previous US Defence Secretary once said, known knowns and known unknowns. The first one, shot down 10 days ago, did feature sensors and other electronics, so could have been spying for China. The last three were not spy balloons, but as to what they were, well, that's still one of those unknowns.
President Biden may have given the impression today of a commander-in-chief with his eye on threats coming over the horizon, but he has maintained a resolute silence about the details of the latest objects to be shot down over North America. And there is considerable pressure on him to address the nation.
My biggest concern is just the lack of transparency with the American public.
Today, senators were given a classified briefing about what the military have discovered and what they've shot down. Even senior Republicans seem assuaged by what they were told.
I mean, there are a lot of things to worry about. This is not very high on my worry chart.
And what was the mood in the room, would you say?
Well, people are interested and curious as to what we know, and the reality is we don't know a lot about what these items are yet.
But they're all balloons, are they?
You know, they didn't characterize them in that way.
The more transparent we can be and the more open, probably the better, but I didn't hear anything in there that unnerved me.
The FBI is continuing to assess the first balloon, parts of which have been recovered off the coast of South Carolina. But the other three objects remain difficult to retrieve in a remote area of Canada, on the sea ice off Alaska and at the bottom of a lake. The White House is not ruling out the possibility military jets may have shot down innocuous weather balloons over the weekend, saying they don't believe the objects were part of any spying program.
These could be tied to commercial or research entities and benign. That is something that the intelligence community has looked into.
President Biden has told his national security team to come up with protocols about when to shoot down unidentified objects. But his continuing silence isn't helping to draw a line under the affair. For now, there are no answers about the precise nature of the latest three objects to be shot down until they're recovered from remote locations across Canada and the United States. But this whole episode has thrown into sharp relief gaps in the defences of America, which officials are now rapidly seeking to plug. Dan Rivers, News at 10, Washington.
The BBC's operation in India looks to be paying the price for a documentary it showed here, criticising Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Its offices in New Delhi and Mumbai have been raided, strangely perhaps, by tax officers. The phones and documents of BBC staff were confiscated. Mr Modi did manage to stop the documentary being shown in India, but clips have appeared on social media.
This series tells the story of Narendra Modi's troubled relationship with India's Muslims.
This is the BBC documentary India's authorities were desperate for their people not to see.
It is obviously a stain on his reputation.
It criticises the country's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, and his role in anti-Muslim riots. More than 1,000 were killed in Gujarat in 2002, and it's alleged authorities allowed or even encouraged the violence. something Modi, who is Chief Minister of the state at the time, has always denied. This morning, at two of the BBC's offices in the country, a search was carried out by India's tax department. At a press conference, a spokesperson for Modi's party claimed the BBC has a tainted history of working with dislike and malice against India. But others argue today's search is a ploy to intimidate and an undemocratic move in the world's biggest democracy.
He wants to control Meta, he wants to control WhatsApp, he wants to control Twitter, he wants to control, of course, the Indian media. We know that story. Now he also wants to control and intimidate foreign media. Why?
The fallout has been going on for weeks. These were the chaotic scenes at Delhi University last month. Police and security staff scuffling with students. They wanted to learn more about the documentary in question, but the authorities were determined to block them from watching it, much to their dismay.
Where is our freedom to express? Here we students are not supposed to watch a documentary. If it is hidden, if it is banned, then sure there might be something important in it.
Since Modi came to power in 2014, there have been consistent questions over his approach to the media.
Could he have done more to prevent violence?
The BBC say their documentary was rigorously researched and want the matter resolved quickly. But the fact they are one of a number of news organisations to be searched in recent years suggests this is a long-term issue in India. Mark McQuillan, News at 10.
The fallout from the abduction, rape and murder of Sarah Everard by a serving PC continues to haunt the police. Two other officers are now facing misconduct cases for how they investigated Wayne Couzens for indecent exposure just days before Miss Everard's murder. Couzens pleaded guilty yesterday to 3 counts of indecent exposure. That has allowed the Independent Office for Police Conduct to pursue disciplinary proceedings. Now, if you've been following our reports on sexual harassment and misogyny in the fire services, you are not alone. The Chief Inspector of Fire and Rescue has now demanded all fire services in England notify him of every gross misconduct case over the past year. And Paul, who has been investigating this, as you will have seen, joins me now. Now, Paul, this is, I mean, let's be honest, this has been a shocking investigation and there's been a response tonight. What have they said?
Well, the inspectorate essentially saying that they want to take a closer inspection of fire and rescue services in England following these allegations. In fact, this is the letter from the Chief Inspector to all fire services across England, saying that the kind of behaviour we've uncovered risks damaging public confidence in the fire service. And what he wants to know is every single misconduct case that every single fire service in England is currently investigating or has investigated over the past 12 months. He wants to know about all of them. And he also wants to know about any other concerns around the culture and values of these fire services, which he says may have the potential to attract media or public interest. I think this is partly about the inspectorate trying to get on the front foot here, do a good thing, be proactive, grab this issue by the horns. I think it's also an indication that perhaps they've been slightly on the back foot over all of this. For example, a couple of weeks ago, you remember, Tom, that we exposed the wrongdoing or alleged wrongdoing at Dorset and Wiltshire Fire and Rescue Service, including firefighters allegedly taking photos of women who died at the scenes of car crashes. Well, just 2 weeks earlier, the inspectorate had rated that fire service as good, including good in terms of its culture. So I had a bit of a deep dive into what kind of metrics it was using to come up with that. And it said, well, the values the organisation stands by, staff are well aware of those values. They undertook a survey of staff and found that 19% were bullied and harassed, and yet they still felt that that was a good service. So look, the Chief Inspector has asked for all of these responses by today. He's going to report back later this year, and I suspect it'll be more detailed than previous reports have been.
OK, Paul, thank you very much indeed. Now, the 16-year-old transgender girl, Brianna Jai, who was murdered on Saturday, was remembered tonight by around 1,000 people at a vigil. It was held in Liverpool city centre. Brianna was stabbed in a park in her hometown of Warrington, 20 miles away. Detectives are still questioning two 15-year-olds, a girl and a boy. Police initially said Brianna's murder was not a hate crime, but now they are investigating whether it was a possibility after all. For England's Lionesses, major football tournaments are coming around quickly. It was only last summer they won the Euros. Now they are already gearing up for this summer's World Cup in Australia and New Zealand. Their main warm-up tournament begins this week.
For England's players and women's football, it was a game-changing moment. Success in the Euros last summer won them not just the trophy, but millions of new fans. Today, even training drew a crowd, watching the Lionesses prepare for their next big test, the rather less prestigious Arnold Clark Cup. But goalkeeper Mary Earps says it's the perfect training ground for a much bigger prize, the World Cup this summer.
We're really looking forward to a big year ahead. It's going to be an incredible tournament. One we're all really looking forward to, but it's going to be really, really tough. I think you could see that from the competition in Europe in the summer. It was really, really tough, and we expect no different. So the Arnold Clark Cup is about us preparing for that, really.
The round-robin tournament kicks off on Thursday, with England playing Italy, Belgium, but first South Korea in the space of just 7 days. The Lionesses hoping to retain their title. England's coach says playing in the same competition this time last year was vital preparation for the success that followed in the summer. A chance to test her players with tournament football before they aim to go one better this summer. Several big names from last year returned to the squad, including the captain Leah Williamson and the final winning goal scorer Chloe Kelly. But Beth Mead, the top scorer from the Euros, is out injured, while Jill Scott and Ellen White have now retired. Newcomer Laura Coombs last played for England 8 years ago and admits expectations are somewhat higher these days.
It's a really positive place. I mean, coming off the back of the Euros, it's a lot more with the media. Yeah, it's an amazing group to be a part of, and you just feel lucky when you're out there training that the level is so high. You're only going to be tested every day.
There you go.
England's players have had to get used to a new superstar status after their achievements in 2022. This week could be the first step towards even bigger stardom in 2023. Ben Chapman, News at 10, Staffordshire.
Finally, roses are red, violets are blue. Banksy's an artist out to fool you. Yep, he's been up to his usual Valentine's Day tricks, but his mural this year has a theme of domestic violence. That wasn't what concerned the local council, though. Refuse collectors in Margate in Kent turned up in high-vis jackets to carry away a key part of the installation.
Though the artist's identity remains a mystery, his work never stays secret for long. Crowds were drawn to a street in Margate today to capture their own shots of Banksy's latest piece. It depicts a 1950s housewife with a bruised eye and missing tooth. She smiles while she hides her husband's body in a freezer. As the country marked the annual Day of Love, a reminder that some relationships exist in the absence of it.
So she has a last laugh, but it's quite macabre, isn't it, really? And quite a good, on Valentine's Day. Very apt, very Banksy, isn't it, really?
I think you have to see it as a humorous picture as well. I don't think it's meant to be a serious thing. I think it's more like the sort of old comedy seaside postcard.
I hope that people will respect it and they will come and look at it and see the rest of Margate at the same time.
But with many of Banksy's pieces, as quickly as it went up, parts of it were removed.
No way!
This morning, 2 apparent council workers cleared the fly-tipped rubbish turned artwork.
Seriously, we work for the council.
His work is often damaged or even destroyed, both accidentally and intentionally. His girl with balloon was deliberately shredded moments after it sold at auction. But his girl with the pierced eardrum was vandalised, daubed with black paint. As for the missing freezer in Margate, the perhaps zealous Thanet Council have now admitted they took it and will return it when it's been made safe. Ellie Pitt, News at 10.
The missing freezer in Margate. There's a headline. That's it. See you tomorrow. Good night. Thanks for watching.